Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Do you ever feel like you're doing the journey alone? Have you ever felt like that you just need someone to talk to, someone who could bring some perspective into your world? Or maybe you're not the type of person who learns from watching video courses or reading books, and you just want to talk with someone specifically about your challenges and how to break through them. I want to introduce you to the High Performance Men's Coaching Program. It's an intensive coaching experience designed to unlock a man's full potential in his life, business, and relationships. Over this past year, I've brought together and trained some of the best coaches in the world to help men step up, stop playing small, and become the strongest versions of themselves. Learn more about High Performance Men's Coaching at kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. You are not alone, and we are here to cut through the crap, hold you accountable, and challenge you so that you can make your dreams become a reality. Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Connor Beaton, the founder of Man Talks. He's also a TEDx speaker. He's been featured in CBS, Stand Magazine, and has spoken on stages around North America, sharing a message about helping men become better fathers, leaders through real connections, conversations, and powerful communities. Connor, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right, and Connor, we're going to dive in, just boom, straight in with a success quote or something that really connects with you that's helped you on your journey. So what do you got for us, and what does that mean to you?
First off, I love that you start off with this, and my quote is actually of my own, and not to come from a place of ego, but right. You know what? It's like my own little personal motto, and it's aim for fulfillment and success will follow. And for me, it's a reminder because I'm a really like alpha-driven, ambitious hustler, and I can get lost in accomplishment-based quote unquote success where I'm just achieving, and I'll get to a place where I'm like, this is meaningless and I'm not fulfilled by any of this. Why the fuck am I doing it? And so for me, this is like a huge reminder of, if I'm aiming for fulfillment, if I'm aiming for the things, this isn't just about like, trying to sell people on passions and stuff like that. This is like what fuels you, what fulfills you, what lights you up. And when you aim for those things, that's when you're going to move in the direction of real, true success, because is finding the things that like really fuel and fulfill us.
What are some of those examples of accomplishment-based successes that you've had in the past that you were chasing?
Yeah, I grew up playing hockey, and in hockey, it was just like, how can I move up into the next league? How can I become captain? How can I make like MVP? And, all of those things were great. And then that started to filter into like my work life, right? How can I get that raise? How can I make more money? And there was a point where it just became more. And, I'm fortunate enough to work with men from like all over North America. And I just see this as like such a common theme where guys are running 7, 8, 9-figure businesses, and they're no different than the guys that are, making 30K a year. They still struggle with the same thing, which is a lot of them are unhappy with the work that they're doing because they've chased the sort of like what I call the golden handcuffs, right? Where they chase the money. They find themselves in a space where, they're running a $10 million company, but they hate what they're doing and they just want to get out of it so bad. So I started to see that not only in my own life, but with the guys that I was working with, and really started to take a step back. And since sort of having this motto of aim for fulfillment and success will follow, a lot of things have changed because it just gives you, at least it gives me a filter to remind myself, am I going to be fulfilled by this? And if it's a yes, then if it's a hell yes, then I should definitely go after it.
And so why do you think we, especially as men, constantly are living in that accomplishment-based type of success, or I'm viewing almost my worth as a man based on these external successes that I have? Like, what's that connection there?
Yeah, it's a really great question. In that space, a lot of our self-worth is attached to our accomplishments, right? And so for a lot of guys, happiness resides on the other side of a goal that they've set for themselves, right? Whether it's hooking up with some woman that they're really attracted to, or whether it's getting the next promotion, or, making $100,000 a year, or like whatever the case may be, a lot of the times fulfillment and happiness is contingent on some result. And the reason for that is because as men, we've evolved over the last, however many thousands of years to be these like providers and protectors. And so we used to have this like really clear purpose of go out and gather food or hunt for food. And when you did that, you were successful. And now it's not that simple, right? Like you can make $50,000 a year and provide for yourself and your family. You might not have like the life that you want, but you can still do that. And so our indicators for success and happiness have now kind of become very skewed, right? Because 1,000 years ago, success and happiness was like, if I can go out and kill something and forage some stuff and bring it home and feed my family, I'm not only successful, but I'm happy because we're all thriving. But now in today's culture, that's not the same case. So our indicators for how we're successful and what makes us happy is totally different. We get to ask some very, very different questions than the men that came before us, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
Wow. And I find it interesting, and I do agree with there are men who are making 6, 7, 8, even 9 figures. I've met some of these men here in San Diego, and their level of, let's say, happiness is the same as the guy who is making $45,000 a year, whereas money is not necessarily adding to their happiness after a certain point. It almost in a way seems to be taking away.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that will use things like money and alcohol and sex and drugs and whatnot to like numb out some of the really important questions that are sort of nagging at them.
Let's talk about that numbness.
Yeah.
What are they numbing? And let's dive into these questions. I'm excited.
I love your enthusiasm, man. It's so good. I mean, listen, like a lot of guys are posing the question, like, why am I here? That's a very fundamental and rudimentary question. When I start working within the organization of Man Talks, like when they come into Man Talks, it's like, why are you here? Why are you here on this earth? Like, what are you here to do? And so the questions in and around purpose is usually like the biggest question, like, what am I here to do? What makes me happy? And if I can, how am I going to leave a legacy behind? Those are usually like the 3 pillars that men usually ask questions about. And within those, there's like a huge subset, right? Like, am I good enough? Am I strong enough? Do I last long enough in bed? Like all of these questions usually come up for men. And, one of the biggest blockers for a lot of guys is shame. And, shame is one of the biggest killers of masculinity, of really healthy masculinity. So what stops a lot of these guys when they're in this space, maybe they've built the 6-figure business or 7-figure or 8-figure business, and they've gotten to this space and they've realized, okay, shit, like I made all this money and now I'm here and I'm still not happy. Like I thought that this was going to lead to happiness and now I'm not. And so they start turning to booze or excessive amounts of sex or drugs or gambling, like whatever the case may be. And that actually stops them from like really diving inside and figuring out like, what is it that I actually want? Like starting to tell the truth on themselves. And when they start numbing out, they just layer on the shame on top of it and on top of it. And then, the more shame and the more guilt that we have, the less likely we are to actually dive into some of these questions.
What if here a man asks himself what he wants, answers it, and then goes after it, and then is still unfulfilled, and then does it again, and just keeps doing that, where he's asking himself these questions, and he actually does achieve what he set out to achieve, but he's still left empty?
Yeah, so I mean, that does happen for some men, and there comes a point where, have you ever heard of appreciative inquiry? Have you ever heard of that?
No. Yeah, what is that?
Cool. So appreciative inquiry is a form of recognition in positive psychology. And in positive psych and in appreciative inquiry, which is part of Daniel Goleman's work, he kind of like dives into, Daniel Gottman, I got to get that right. He dives into appreciative inquiry and basically tears it apart and says like, this is what it is. And basically what appreciative inquiry is a means of recognizing ourselves and other people. And where most people go wrong is that they don't know how to give or receive recognition properly. So this is a little tangent and I'll tie it back in here really quick. But in a relationship, so Daniel Gottman can basically, let's say there's, a listener out there that's listening to this podcast and him and his wife have been struggling for a few years. They've been married for a decade, let's say, or they've been married for a year. They can sit in front of Daniel Gottman and John Gottman, sorry, they can basically talk for like 30 to 60 minutes. And just in listening how they interact, he can predict with a 90% accuracy whether or not they'll be divorced in 5 years.
Yeah, I've heard this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's all based off of how we recognize our partner, how we, give them praise, how we hear what they want to celebrate. And the same piece goes for ourselves. We often forget that the things that make really happy people happy is that they actually let themselves experience the joy of success. They let themselves experience and recognize themselves for all of the hard work that they've done. So it's not just about like getting to the next marker and then checking off the box and then going to the next marker and checking off the box. Like there needs to be a space of self-recognition in there. And some of the happiest men and women that I have ever come in contact with, some of the most successful men and women, are the ones that have figured out not only how to, hustle and be ambitious and reach those targets, but when they get to that target, to actually sit with it and let it in and recognize themselves for, the crazy amount of hard work that they probably had to put into it to get to where they are.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And so would you recommend some sort of like weekly, quarterly, or annual check-in where you do something for yourself or give yourself credit for what you have done in the last few weeks, months, or years?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I have like a weekly check-in on Sunday nights. I call it the honest audit. Anybody out there can use it. But basically the honest audit is just a sort of like tally of the week. Like, what went really well? What do I want to recognize myself for? Like what do I deserve a shout out for? Because sometimes, especially for the entrepreneurs out there, it can be a little lonely, right? And we don't have somebody there to pat us on the back and be like, good job, bro. Like you're doing an amazing job, especially if you're a solo entrepreneur. And so at the end of the week, I always have the honest audit and I just break it down into what I want to be recognized for. What was, a major success for me this week? What could have gone better? And, where did I really drop the ball? And in that space, it's great because you get to see where you could learn, where you can grow, and where you're really thriving and succeeding. So you start to see what your strengths are.
Wow. And so what went well? What am I going to recognize myself for? What could I have done better? And where did I drop the ball? Just for the audience. Yeah. I think that's, and how long have you been doing something like this?
Oh man, I would have started back in like 2011.
Wow. That's incredible. Weekly or is this daily?
Weekly.
Okay. And so what has some of the results been for yourself, would you say? What do you experience?
I mean, it started off as like a daily gratitude practice, which actually really helped pull me out of a dark space like 5 years ago. And I just found that as my schedule got busier, I started working for Apple at the time, way back in the day. And then I started building Man Talks on the side. So as things started to get busier, I found that doing sort of like 30 to 45 minutes of writing and journaling and gratitude practice in the morning just like was a really tough fit into my schedule. So what I started doing was just on like a weekly basis, right? So on the Sunday nights. And some of the results have been pretty impressive because it's really helped me balance out my life. I think that's something that a lot of guys, struggle with, whether they work the 9 to 5 or, whether they're an entrepreneur. It's like, how do I find balance as, a guy that's running a company and be a father and be a husband, and coach my son's little league team? Like, how do I do all of that? And the cool thing is by taking 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the end of the week to just look back at your week, give yourself a shout out. It really helps to balance out because you might look at the week and be like, you know what? I freaking crushed it at work this week. I rocked, but I really dropped the ball and I haven't taken my wife out this week. And like, I haven't actually even really connected with her that much. And so, then you can take 5 minutes, schedule something in. But that's been the biggest result is just finding balance in my life.
Wow. Yeah. Where do you think, maybe speaking for yourself or for other men that you've worked with, where do you find that most men are dropping the ball?
It really depends on like where their priorities reside, to be honest. Guys that are generally super ambitious, love to hustle, they've got the entrepreneurial spirit. Usually where they're struggling is usually in their intimate relationships, right? Like they're all over the place and maybe they're in a committed relationship. But if you talk to their wife or partner or whatever the case may be, they'd be like, yeah, I haven't seen him in like 3 weeks. So that's usually the case. If they're like a A-type hustler where they're, really putting work in, then their relationships are usually suffering a little bit. The other piece that a lot of guys really struggle with is their friends, actually having like really connected friendships with other guys. And it's a crazy stat that's come out in the last couple of years, but in North America, Australia, and the UK, 50% of men over the age of 19 can't identify a best friend. So That means that, if
Can
they're
you
going through
can you say that again? 50% of men over the age of 19, 19, teenage years,
Yeah.
19, cannot identify a best friend.
That's right. Yeah. So, this is like hugely detrimental. And I kind of dove into this a little bit in my TED talk, but since then it's started to come out a little bit more. But these are the types of things, this social isolation that leads to some pretty significant issues. One of the biggest indicators for depression is a very simple question. Do you have somebody to call at 2:00 in the morning outside of your family in case of an emergency? And if the answer is no, then you have a much higher susceptibility to depression because of just social isolation. So for men, a lot of guys don't have these really close bonds that we used to have. And it's one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of guys struggle with. And so, you get busy with your career or you start a family, and all of a sudden your guy time, time to hang out with your friends and go grab a beer and talk about how your relationship's going or talk about how business is going, all of a sudden starts to fall by the wayside. And it has some really detrimental impacts on men's mental health and physical health.
Absolutely. Okay. So with the hustlers working too hard, often neglecting significant other or neglecting relationships, what do you think is going on there? What if the hustler or the man is purposely working hard to avoid relationships? Just kind of I'm just throwing some things here.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great, man. It's a really great observation. There are oftentimes the hustlers will either be doing it intentionally to sometimes avoid a relationship that's not working, right? Maybe they're avoiding a friendship that's not working and they don't want to deal with it, or things at home aren't working really well and they just don't know how to deal with it, and they don't know how to talk to their wife about it, or whatever the case may be. And so they just avoid it altogether and they pour more time and energy and effort into it. There are other people who do it a little bit more consciously, and there was a time and place in my life where I was working, as a market manager for Apple and overseeing a really big amount of business for them and building Man Talks. And so I was doing like 90-hour weeks. At first, I didn't even realize that I was like being a crap friend, I was just hustling. I was like in the zone, really working and trying to build what I was trying to build. And one of my buddies was like, listen, man, I haven't seen you in forever. I feel like I don't know what's going on in your life anymore. And that's not okay for me. And he's like, I want to hang out. I want to know what's going on.
How'd you feel when he called you out?
A weird mixture of feeling like crap, like I was a bad friend, but also really grateful. I think sometimes we can put blinders on because we're sometimes very linear, and we're very focused in on like one specific goal or task. And so we can put blinders on, and, really, really great friends are the ones that are going to call us out on our BS and be like, listen, man, you're dropping the ball. Like, I haven't seen you in weeks. I haven't heard anything from you. Like, what's going on? And so it kind of like pulled me out of that space and made me realize that there was an opportunity to kind of connect with my friends intentionally. And so I ended up connecting with, a whole bunch of like my really close friends and just saying, listen, I'm in this space. I'm probably going to be in this space for like the next 6 to 8 months, realistically, and just being super transparent with them, and requested that they all get in touch with me and, just fill me in on how things are going with work and life and family and all those types of things, and to make time to schedule time with me. It was incredible how it was received. Like, everybody was like, oh yeah, I totally get it. I can see that you're hustling. I love it. I want to support you. And if it just means that like, I'm going to set a calendar date or reminder for myself to text you on like Monday at 9 a.m., then cool. Like, let's just do that. So it was fantastic.
I'm letting this kind of soak in here. The hustler's not working hard, neglecting relationships, friends not connecting. I can't believe this whole thing about being 19, 50% of men can't. Is this in specific country that you're talking about, or is this in North America? 50% of men not being able to identify a best friend after the age of 19.
Yeah, so it's North America, the UK, and Australia.
Okay, so like Western English-speaking men, basically.
Yeah. And I think that that's because of like a lot of the research is done in those countries. I'm sure that if you went to, other countries, but if you look at countries like Italy and Germany and France, like they have a very different social structure, and it's much more commonplace to have a group of guys that you sit down with like every 2 or 3 days and have a glass of wine and like talk about your relationship, talk about life, talk about your kids, talk about your work. Like, it's much more commonplace than in North American society.
Yeah. I would think potentially even like Latin America or like Latin speaking countries might be doing better in those areas.
Yeah.
Just based on like the structure of like community.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of guys face is like, how do I have those like great social connections with the other men in my life? And, like this is something that I talk about all the time, is that there's three types of men in our life. There's the men that look up to us, there's the men that stand beside us, and there's the men that call us forward. And most of the guys that I've seen and worked with and talked to, they'll have like a good social circle of guys that look up to them, and a good social circle of men that, they consider their brothers that are standing next to them in some capacity, but they're really lacking somebody that's calling them forward and calling them out. And I think that sort of like quote unquote mentorship or leadership is something that a lot of guys struggle to find.
We've obviously pointed out a big issue, societal, for men. I agree with it here. What can men start doing, even starting as soon as today, to really start building their tribe, to start building that brotherhood of men around them so that they can move forward and get through some of the challenges in their lives and have more happiness too?
Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty simple things that they can do. First and foremost, schedule a time to connect with your guy friends. Like if you have, I call it the inner circle, right? It's that the 5 people you spend the most time with are the people that will directly influence your character, right? So think about your inner circle of guys, just specifically guys, and think about how much time you spend with them, and then now imagine the conversations that you're having with them. Are they conversations of substance, or are they just conversations where you're just like talking about the 3 B's, which I talk about all the time, which is boobs, babes, and blood sports, right? Like that's kind of the conversation that most guys have. And so, once you start to like really think about your inner circle and you start to think about the conversations that you're having, then you can start to look at, okay, am I having conversations of substance? And if not, how can I shift that conversation? How can I start to like get in with my guy friends and talk about something outside of just sports and, hot chicks? And so once you start to do that and you start to talk about like really meaningful things, you engage in the conversation with the guys in your life in a totally different way. And all of a sudden they start to want to like have more conversations with you because you're being the catalyst for a more meaningful conversation. They're not used to that. They're like, what the hell is this? Like, I just talked about quantum mechanics today with my buddy. Like, that's so cool. I never expected that. Like, I learned something new. Or, he talked about like the female orgasm, and like, I just learned something totally incredible. And like, I want to hang out with that guy again. So, when we bring these pieces into the conversation, we're going to start to have a much stronger bond with the guys in our life.
Yeah. I think a good question in it, just building on this, that men could ask, just kind of because the new year's coming around, is just, hey man, like what would make 2017 your best year ever?
Totally.
I think it opens up a lot of realness and vulnerability, and also just, you know where this guy wants to go and how you can support your friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And what if a guy's listening to this and thinks, this is good, yeah, but that's just not for me. I'm not going to do that. Like, what are the long-term effects of not taking action on building a brotherhood or just having close male friends?
Yeah, I mean, without being like too dark about the whole situation, like the reality of the situation is like, listen, there's a pretty big, like not epidemic, but there's a pretty big challenge that is being faced that not a lot of people are talking about, which is last year, out of the 800,000 people that took their lives, 3/4 of them were guys. So that means that out of 800,000 people that committed suicide last year, 600,000 of them were men. And the reason for that is because of the social structure, is because of like our identity as men, of, our perception of masculinity. And one of the most challenging things that a human being can face is social isolation. Why do you think why in prisons, the worst thing that we can do is throw somebody into the boot, throw them into the tank, like put them in social confinement, right? Into complete confinement. That's the worst thing that we can do to a human being. So when we cut ourselves off from having these really meaningful connections. And I'm sure that there's guys out there listening to this podcast right now that are like nodding their head. They're like, yes, I have a bunch of like acquaintances. I have a bunch of guy friends, and that's great. But I don't feel like I have 1 or 2 of those guys that like, no matter what is going on in my life, no matter what I've done or no matter what's happened to me, I can go and freaking talk to them about it. So the reality of the situation is, if you don't do this, I'm not saying that it's going to lead to like suicide or anything like that, because that would be absurd. But the reality of the situation is that you will be more prone to things like depression. You absolutely will be. It's psychologically and scientifically proven. Your quality of life was going to go down a little bit. Like, you're going to struggle to have people to connect with. You're not going to be surrounded by the type of people who are going to push you forward and call you out on your BS and who are going to like have your best interest in mind. And so, there's only benefits to really doing this. There's only benefits to engaging with the guys around you and having more meaningful conversation. And if they're not up for it, they're not open to it, like, you might need to look at your inner circle, and you might need to bring some new players into the inner circle.
I think, one way you can look at this too is a sports team. It's constantly bringing in new players. Like, you look at any sports team, basketball team, football team, baseball team, it's constantly changing. And just to show that in your life, like, it's okay to bring other people in as you grow. Like, it's okay to bring in other people who can be an asset to your growth and who you can be an asset to their growth as well.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, if you move from the juniors to, I'm going to use a hockey analogy because I'm from Canada, but, if you move from the juniors, if you move from juniors to NHL, you're going to be surrounded by a whole bunch of new people, right? And those people are going to elevate your game. That's the reality of the situation. And, sometimes there's people in our life that have been there since childhood that they're not elevating our game, and they haven't been elevating our game in a long time. And they see us as, like the 15-year-old punk that we used to be, and they just can't let it go. And, it just, in some ways, in some capacity, it weighs us down, right? And it's a lot lighter when you let that go and you can move forward and you find other people that are playing at your level, that are willing to, hold you accountable to the things that you say and that you want. And I think that's the other benefit to this, is that you're going to be surrounded by guys who are like committed to holding your ass accountable to not only being successful like financially, but being successful from a fulfillment standpoint.
Yeah. I think the benefits are clearly there, and we've outlaid it for the audience here to understand the benefits of developing those strong male friendships. Now, speaking of these type of systemic issues around men, I think another issue that we could discuss briefly is porn and how it affects men, and it potentially could be related in with what we're talking about here around neglecting relationships. What are your thoughts on porn, and how is it impacting men today?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I get asked this question quite a bit. And, pornography is one of those things. I just did a post a couple of weeks ago, and it got like crazy amounts of traction, and people were reaching out and asking questions, and it was kind of nuts. But, porn for me, I'll share a little bit personal. Like, back in my early 20s, I actually like really struggled with pornography. And, to the point where it was negatively impacting my relationship. I didn't want to go to work. It was kind of crazy. It was pretty bad. It was a lot of porn every day. And, I became a bit like obsessed with sex and porn, and my reality of what should be happening in the relationship sexually was totally messed up. And the problem with that is that when we watch porn, we think that our sense of validation as a man, as a partner in our relationship, whether it's with another woman or with another man, regardless of the sexual preference. When we look at porn and we look at it from the perspective of, I need to perform like that, or I need to do those things with my partner, or I'm a failure, totally messes things up.
Or she needs to do this.
Yeah.
Also, she should be doing this, or in this position, or doing these types of things.
Yeah. And then, we basically compare our real sex life to some manufactured pornography. And that is hugely detrimental. I mean, we're seeing the studies come out now of, men that, and this has been going on for a couple of years. The study's been going on for a couple of years, but, men that watch porn to the point where they can't get an erection in real life, right? And then they struggle to have intimacy. There's research coming out of Australia, and this is a little crazy, but there's research coming out of Australia where young boys that are like, in their mid-teens to late teens are using intimacy as a means to reward their partners for sexual favors. So what I mean by that is let's say there's like this 16-year-old kid and, he wants a BJ. He'll basically tell the girl, I'll kiss you if you give me a blowjob, right? People are now starting to leverage intimacy to get physical sex, right? And that's because they're so basically desensitized. And all that it comes down to is the physical act, and the intimacy is completely removed from that situation, right? So it's having some pretty crazy impact.
What's really interesting is the kids today growing up are going through puberty, watching porn, having access to it in their pockets. which is different than what it's the generation before was like magazines and videotapes, which you really couldn't do privately unless no one was home, stuff like that. And then it was on the computer, but now it's in your phone, and now it's with you wherever you go. 100% of the time you have access to it. And so that boy, when he grows up and when he's whatever age, let's just say 16, 18, whatever, that his experience of what sex, he'll have almost what is, he'll have put in his 10,000 hours. And he would be a master at porn. I had written a book called The Porn Pandemic, and boys are starting to watch porn at age 11. And so by the time he's like 18 or so, he would have put in a good number of hours. And then the scary part is, just imagine if that was your daughter and like this guy's been watching porn. It's not even so much his fault, but just that it's available to him. It's free. It's in his pocket. He's going through puberty. Why would you not? Why would you not be curious? But his experience with a woman and her experience with a man who's been watching porn or a boy or teenager will be considerably different. And I think it just changes the way even women are viewing sex at that age. Not women today who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s and beyond, but women who their first encounter with sex is with a man who's already been watching porn for maybe half or a quarter of his life.
Yeah.
And so women are like, it's just changing the way that they view sex. Like that might be just how they think sex is what kind of the conversation I'm leaning towards.
From speaking with a lot of women, like a lot of women, because our events, even though it's called Man Talks, the events are open to men and women, and we attract out some really phenomenal women. And
that's great.
Having worked and spoken with them quite a bit, like women don't want to be treated like they're in a porn. Like that's kind of the funny thing. That's the messed up thing, is that we watch porn, guys watch porn, and we're like, oh, I need to do my girlfriend like this because that's the only way that she's going to be satisfied, right? Like, but for the most part, women are like, yeah, most women don't like porn. They watch that and they're like, dear God, don't treat me like that. Like there's just no intimacy in it. And like, that's not saying that you can't do some dark shadow, dominating stuff to your partner, but for a woman to like fully relax into it and to feel safe and to like actually enjoy it, not just to have you like go to town on her, but for her to actually enjoy it, there needs to be a connection there. There needs to be intimacy. And when you do that, you're going to deepen the pleasure for your partner on a level that you just don't see in pornography.
Yeah. There's a sexuality, I think it's called demisexuality. I believe it's called demisexuality. I can Google that. But there's this sort of study that shows that more and more women are becoming demisexual, which means that they can really only be sexually attracted to the man when there is a higher level of intimate and emotional connection. Meaning that like they just don't look at men and think, oh, I want to have sex with this guy just by looking at him, whereas men can, like a light switch, a man can look at a woman and be like, oh man, that would be great. Just showing that more and more women are leaning towards more of like a volume knob type approach where it's this subtle but slow attraction that is slowly turned on like a volume knob. I'm wondering if porn is having that effect where women are craving for intimacy, and the man who can provide that is a man that I think women are really going to enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I probably have more women reach out to me because of the work that we do. And I'm sure that you have this as well, where you have women reach out and they're just so freaking grateful. They're like, thank you for doing the work that you're doing. I love it. Like, there needs to be more men who are willing to be intimate, willing to like have open and vulnerable conversations. And that doesn't mean that you need to like break down and cry every single week, in front of your partner, but being courageous and brave and strong enough to actually talk about the real shit that's going on in your life. And women are craving this intimacy. They are craving the connection, and it takes a really strong man to be able to provide that. For a lot of women, for most women, it's like the peak of masculinity. If you can be in what I'll refer to as in your masculine, if you can be in your masculine and, really strong and a bit stoic and, very somewhat assertive, not aggressive, but assertive and direct, but also provide emotional connection and have emotional conversations, that's like the pinnacle. They're like, they're not looking for some trick. They're not looking for some like pickup artist BS line, fractioning, any of that other kind of stuff that people may have read on the internet. That's not what they're looking for. What they're really looking for is for a guy to say, this is what I want. This is who I am. This is what I love and enjoy. And to be able to connect with them on a more intimate and emotional level. And when you do that, when you have that, again, balance, right? When you integrate that balance of the masculine energy and the feminine energy, you will blow your partner away on a level that you never thought possible.
It's like the pickup, the seduction. I'm very aware of that whole community. It will get attention. It's like an ad. It'll get your attention, but it's not going to make you buy.
Yeah, I
think that's the perfect analogy.
That's a great analogy. Well, I mean, even like Neil Strauss, right? Like you look at Neil Strauss, he wrote The Game, and then he wrote a book called The Truth, right?
Yeah.
And in The Truth, he talks about his sex addiction, and he talks about how he got like lost in this space, of porn and sex and all that kind of stuff. And when he came out the other side, it was like, no, like the height, the sort of like pinnacle of a relationship is intimacy, and being intimate with the other person.
Yeah. At the end of The Game, even back then when he wrote it, he said that it's not going to lead you to happiness. And he kind of leaves you on this empty feeling. If anyone's, like, oh, I got to read The Game. It's at the end, he says this book is really like, it was entertainment purposes, not to be used as a source of like fulfillment. I think that's like pickup seduction, all this, it's like an ad. It gets your attention. It makes you look, but it doesn't make you buy. I think what makes people buy is what we've been discussing here. What makes a strong, grounded man. I think a key element of that is the vulnerability. You called it the pinnacle of masculinity. What is the shield that men need to drop in order to embrace that level of vulnerability that you're talking about? This is a good interview. I'm loving this.
I appreciate it. I'm having a blast, man. This is great. You know what? I was like, the shield that they need to drop is the bullshit idea that vulnerability makes you less of a man. That is actually the shield, right? I see so many people like working towards this idea of being invulnerable. Well, let's just logically throw this out there, all right? Trying to be invulnerable is the biggest vulnerability. All you do is leave yourself open because you're constantly trying to work towards, and it's exhausting. And I say this from a space of like, I have been there. I've been there to try and be impenetrable, to be unhurtable, to be in this space of just like this perfect man. And it is absolutely freaking exhausting. It's exhausting. And, the biggest shield and armor that we wear as men is that we should be impenetrable, like Superman. And I idolized Superman for a long time. But the great part about Superman is that he is like a demigod who can be brought down by like this like little stone, this like little crystal, this piece of kryptonite. And it's in that invulnerability that humanity actually resides. So in order for, most men to actually be vulnerable and have those conversations, they need to get over the fact that by being vulnerable, there's actually strength in that. You can find strength in getting up in front of people and, telling some of your truth, or telling your partner that you've, screwed up in some way, shape, or form, or, that you're nervous, or that you're not really too sure what choice to make. Like, it's the reality of being a human being. I would say that that's the biggest shield or armor that we need to drop.
Yeah. Or what can we create here as a challenge for those listening to lean towards dropping that shield, to lean towards being more vulnerable today? Something they could say, a conversation. What's something that we can create for the audience here?
Yeah, I think one actionable to kind of take away is, you could think about, let's just use the intimate relationship as an example. And if you're not in an intimate relationship, I'll give you something for right after. But cool. Let's just use your intimate relationship as an example. If you're really wanting to deepen the connection with your partner and, create a space, and kind of get over some of those hurdles, one of the biggest questions, one of the best questions is, what's one truth about my relationship that I've been avoiding? What's one truth about my relationship that I've been avoiding? It's going to be on your side of the fence. Don't make it about your partner. Don't be like, well, she's this or he's that or whatever the case may be. Make it about your side of the fence. And so what I mean by that is, let's say the question is, what's one truth about my relationship that I've been avoiding? So let's say it's, I feel anxious or insecure when my partner is with Johnny, right? Or I feel not good enough in bed, or like whatever the case may be. And being able to like unearth that, acknowledge it, and like look at it for what it actually is. And then maybe you don't even necessarily need to go and talk to your partner about it right from the get-go, but having a conversation with one of your buddies and being like, listen, man, this has been coming up for me. I realized the other day that I feel not good enough with my woman in bed, and like I just don't know how to deal with it. And then open up a dialogue about it. And I bet you 9 times out of 10, one of your buddies has been going through something very similar recently, or has been going through something similar in the past, and can give you some insight on how to actually like shift that mindset.
Boom. There it is for the audience. Challenge yourself. Get it done. Share what happens with us. You can go to our websites and contact us. Let's dive into the knowledge round. Just going to ask you a few more rapid fire questions here. Just kind of gut level responses, a little bit shorter for yourself. So,
Sure.
All right, Connor, you ready for the knowledge round?
Let's do it, man.
So you might be wondering, why would I ever invest in a coach? I've never done anything like that before. Well, it's going to shorten your learning curve and save you the time that it would take to achieve your goal. You can avoid making mistakes that you would otherwise make. You'll get more results because everything will be tailored to your specific needs and challenges. The coach will hold you accountable so you can't procrastinate, so you can't be lazy, so you can't say, I didn't have the time. You'll be challenged and pushed harder than you've ever been pushed. You'll have conversations so powerful that you'll feel more energized, alive, and confident and certain about the goals that you have in front of you and where you want to go. Most importantly, where you want to be. You'll go farther than you've ever gone before when you have a coach. If you want to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program, go to kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program. You have got to understand that every successful person in the world invests in coaching to go from good to great. And if you're already a high achiever, then how much more could you achieve if you had a high performance men's coach at your side to push you even further? Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply for our high performance men's coaching program. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, first question I have for you is, what advice would you give to a man who is feeling really lost, really feeling unsure of their purpose?
Go do something creative, 100%. Whether it's art, like, painting, drawing, singing, picking up a musical instrument, dancing, like, I don't care what it is. Go and do something creative. It will help you find your path.
Great. What do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
Shame. 100% shame about something that happened in their childhood, shame about an action that they took in a past relationship, shame about not being good enough at work or in their marriage or as a son or as a father. Shame.
Mm-hmm. And just to build on that, what could be 2 or 3 quick tips on resolving or working through that shame?
The gratitude practice is a really big component of it, like really, really big. Again, it's been scientifically proven that gratitude will help with things like mild depression. But if you can build a gratitude practice, whether it's once a week or once a day, whatever works for you, that will be hugely important. And secondly is talk about it. I can't stress that enough. I'm not saying that you need to go and talk about it with every single person that you meet on the street or everybody at work, but find some people that you trust, that love you, and talk about it with them.
Great. I love it. And let's see here. What have been 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey to becoming a stronger man?
3 of them. All right. So first and foremost is probably a book that nobody's ever heard of.
What? Let's see. All right. What do you got?
It's called The Wisdom of Insecurity.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Awesome. Perfect.
Nice.
So it's by Alan Watts.
Okay.
It's an incredible book. It talks about a lot of things. It's a little bit more high level. Like it's not just about being a man. It's about humanity. It's about finding purpose. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. That is 100%. I read that every year, once a year. Fantastic book. And then finally, I would say a book called To Be a Man. And I'm totally blanking.
It's something Augustus.
Robert Augustus Masters.
Yeah. That sounds like he's like a Roman emperor or something.
But, he actually kind of does.
It does sound, but it's a great book.
I was going to add in one more. Can I do that?
Yeah.
All right. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Okay. Classic. Why do you read Man's Search for Meaning every year? That's the only book you said you read once a year.
Well, I mean, I do read The Wisdom of Insecurity. I've probably read it about 5 or 6 times now. But Man's Search for Meaning is, for me, the reminder that we are the choosing, Like we get to choose. We get to basically delegate meaning in our life. And it's so easy to forget that. It's so easy to put meaning outside of ourselves, in our partner, and put meaning, everything around us, or allow other people to delegate meaning to us, or for life to delegate meaning to us. But it's really in our choosing that we get to step into our purpose and give our life meaning. And so it's that reminder for myself to constantly be like, listen, bro, you're the one that gets to choose. You're the one that has to be out there. You get to decide what your life means and what you leave behind.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those listening who haven't read the book, Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz, which is a concentration camp in World War II. And he was able to move forward and grow from that experience. He lost his family in Auschwitz and the entire whole Holocaust experience. And he was able to walk away and learn from it and grow from it. And so I can't think of anything worse than that, than being in that concentration camp. I know there have been a lot of massacres in this world and things like that, but that is one of those things that if you can overcome that, and then you can look at your life and be like, wow, he overcame that, and I believe in this whole thing, what one man can do, another man can do, then you can overcome your problems, your challenges, your hardships, your adversities. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for bringing that up. This next one's more of a scenario, kind of like a fan favorite here. Connor, imagine you had 60 seconds with your 25-year-old self. If you can envision where he's at personally and professionally, relationships, knowing what you now know today, what would you tell him to do? What would you tell him not to do?
Oh man, with my 25-year-old self, well, he was a mess. Let me see here. I'd probably sum it up in one phrase. It's not very politically correct, but draining your balls and filling your wallet is not going to give you fulfillment. I'd probably just leave it at that.
And then if I could add in what, and then what, no, it's great. It's great because that's often what we're, and in both ways, for draining your balls, both even sexually with women or whatever someone wants, and also with porn is kind of what I'm thinking about. And then, so what would give you fulfillment? What would you tell yourself to start leaning towards?
Yeah, I would say, follow the things that really, the things that it's so cliche, right? Like the things that are going to get you up out of bed in the morning, blah, blah, blah. But what I would really say is if I had to ask myself another question when I was 25, the question that I would probably give myself is, what if it's not about you? Like, what if none of this crazy freaking life that we live in, what if none of it is about you? What would you do then? And, just remind myself back then that life is so much richer when we're committed to giving to other people, when we're committed to being of service to other people, not from like this esoteric, grandiose way, but when we actually give a shit enough to go out and be of service to people every single day. And even if it's just like some small piece of kindness that we can do for somebody that we know, or a message that we can send, it's in those moments that actually makes our life so much richer. And so that's what I would say is just like, what would you do if this isn't about you? How would that change the choices that you're about to make if it wasn't about you and fueling your ego?
Wow. Just letting that soak in. I'm even thinking about that for myself as you're talking. I'm really just, always a student, and just, the things that my guests say, I'm taking in personally too, right there with my audience. So yeah, you really got me thinking there. And so that's going to wrap up the knowledge round. Connor, you crushed it. You passed. You got, I was grading all your answers. You passed.
Awesome, man.
This has been a fantastic episode. What are you excited about in 2017? And please tell me you're working on a book.
I am working on a book. We're actually working on 2 books right now. One of them we're just going to have it as a free giveaway for everybody that's a part of the Man Talks community. And it's called Building Your Brotherhood. And it's really about like how to actually connect with the other guys in your life. And then I'm working on another book, which we're submitting to a publisher right now. So I won't give that one away. Yeah, I am. And so what I'm really excited about for 2017, our events are in 10 cities right now around North America, and we're expanding. So, in Canada, we're in Vancouver, Calgary, Ottawa, Toronto. In the States, we're in Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles. I think I said Chicago, and we're going to Atlanta, New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco. And so we're going to have events live in cities all over North America, and Australia and the UK. We might be coming at you. So watch out.
Awesome, man. Follow up with Connor here at mantalks.com. You can check those things out. Do you have a rough estimate of when the published book? I mean, you don't need to tell me any information, but just kind of like, is it soon or is it kind of end of next year or so?
End of next year will be end of 2017.
Great.
Maybe I'll have to pop back on with you.
Yeah. That's what I was leaning towards, is definitely reach back out to me when that goes live and view me as a resource to impact more men out there. So you got a great message, Connor. It's been great getting to know you. You shared deeply, and today we just impacted thousands of men. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.